Today we are going to be reviewing narrative writing, and remember that narrative writing tells a story. It always has a beginning, a middle where lots of stuff happens, and then an end where the story finishes up. Narrative writing always has characters, setting, and plot. So you might see a writing prompt that looks like this. You have just read a chapter where Milo is finished with his journey and is about to head home. Write a story that continues Milo's return home. Include details describing what he sees and does on his journey home. Be sure to use what you have learned about the setting, characters, and plot of the Phantom Tollbooth. Be sure to use information from the book in your story, and your written response should be in the form of a multi-paragraph story. So let's look at this prompt for a second. The first thing a writer would do when they look at a prompt is they will unpack the prompt. PAC. PAC stands for purpose, audience, and controlling idea. So when I look at this prompt, I know that the purpose for writing is to write a narrative essay. It is telling me to write a story, and that it should be a multi-paragraph story. So I also know that I need to figure out who my audience is. Who am I writing for? If it doesn't tell me who my audience is, like maybe a kindergartner or my teacher, I'm going to assume that it's someone who's educated. So I can use 5th grade vocabulary. And then my controlling idea. What is my whole essay about? Well, it is a narrative essay that's all about Milo's return home. So now that I know what I'm going to write about, I need to remember what I just read. So remember, we've read The Phantom Tollbooth, where the exposition is where the story starts. It starts off with the characters, the setting, and the plot. It has some kind of conflict or call. There's some action, the challenges, and the climax is the turning point of the story. So remember, we talked about in our story, the turning point is when Milo saves Rhyme and Reason and brings them back to the lands beyond. So now we are heading into the transformation section where we find out how the world has changed now, and finally the return. So our story is really going to be taking place right here at the return. Remember, that is a rough highlighter. Remember that the return is when the main character heads back home. So let's think about what we know about this section of the text. Milo says, "Can't you both come with me?" he asked, knowing the answer as he said it. "I'm afraid not, old man," replied the bug. "I'd like to, but I've arranged a lecture tour which will keep me occupied for years." So, will the humbug be in my story? No, he's staying behind. And they do need a watchdog here, barked Talk sadly. So, is Talk going to be there? No. "Goodbye," he shouted. "Goodbye, I'll be back." "Goodbye," shouted Azaz. "Always remember the importance of words and numbers," added the math magician forcefully. "Surely you don't think numbers are as important as words," he heard Azaz shout from the distance. "Is that so?" replied the math magician a little more faintly. "Why, if—" "Oh dear," thought Milo, "I do hope they don't start at all again." And in a moment they had faded from sight as the road dipped, turned, and headed for home. So remember, we have to use what we know about the Phantom Tollbooth. And we know that the way that Milo got into the lands beyond was through the doldrums. So you might look back at the story map. Pause and think about the map. So when we write a narrative essay, we need to remember escape, ESCAPE. We need to establish the situation, the setting, and the characters. Who's the story going to be about? What are they like? Where does the story take place? And the situation is where the story starts. Then the action or the events that happen in the problem. What's the conflict? And then how does the story end? So we have the beginning, the middle, and the end. And do you notice that these elements are very similar to our plot diagram? So we need to remember that narrative writing is going to have a point of view. The point of view of our story, The Phantom Tollbooth, was from an outside narrator. So we have to use words like he, she, they, and Milo. We should not use I, me, and we because we are not in the story. We also know that narrative writing has dialogue, conversations between the characters. Remember that dialogue has speaker tags like he asked or replied the bug. These are things that tell us who is speaking at the time. They also have quotes. Quotes are around the things the actual character said, and the speaker tag comes on the outside. And then finally, you go to a new line after every speaker. So when you look at this part of the text, you see Milo speaks, and then we go down a line, and then the humbug speaks, and then we go down a line, and talk speaks. We go down a line, and the humbug speaks again. And each time we get a new character to speak, we go down a line. And then we remember that narrative writing has sensory details. Sight words help the reader see what's going on. Help them to touch, hear, taste, and smell. Help the reader to feel like they're there. Remember, show, don't tell. So now that we have our prompt, we've unpacked it and really know what we are going to write about, we need to brainstorm. So on your paper, I'm not going to tell you how you should brainstorm. Everyone brainstorms a little different. Maybe your paper just has a bunch of words written all over it, and then you write 1, 2, 3. Or maybe you want to use the plot flowchart and you want to write down the ending. Whatever it is, we are going to brainstorm. So I want you to pause the video as you think about the situation, setting, and characters in your story. Brainstorm. Write them down. Now let's brainstorm and think about what's the action, what events are going to happen, and how do the characters respond? What's the problem or the conflict at the end? And then pause the video and brainstorm. And last but not least, what's the ending? How does the story end? How is the conflict resolved? Once you have a good idea of your story and it is written on paper, you are going to continue working through your reading menu for today.